Here in my silent domain, all stories meet their end. None can cheat death, none. Even the greatest of bards, Orpheus, learned this immutable truth. I recall his desperate gaze as he turned back, defying the prohibition. A single moment, one fateful turn, and the one he so desperately sought to reclaim vanished, dissolving into shadows. We granted him a chance, an unprecedented chance. But such is the nature of the underworld. Its laws are unyielding. And I, Lord of these depths, know this better than any. Prepare yourselves, for you tread upon my territory, where new, chilling tales have only just begun. I recall those times that stretched before time itself, when existence itself was but a faint whisper of unmanifested possibility. Then, the boundless, endless void of chaos yawned before me. Not mere nothingness, no, but a writhing, formless potential. A darkness so encompassing that even the very concept of darkness had yet to be born. It was within this primordial abyssal chasm that the first impulses of creation began their grand ancient dance. From this primal gloom, from the very heart of chaos, emerged the fundamental forces destined to shape all existence. First to appear was Gaia, our Mother Earth. Her form, like a mesmerizing dream, slowly crystallized from the void, taking shape within the mind of a slumbering god. And as she first drew breath, that very act of creation birthed space itself, pushing back the boundaries of non-existence. Following her, Tartarus emerged. The deepest chasm, a maw so immense that even Gaia's boundless depths could not contain it. Unlike Gaia's warm, fertile embrace, Tartarus was the embodiment of chilling cold, of impenetrable darkness, a place where light itself came to die. It was the proto-underworld, a domain of such terrifying, bottomless depth that a fall into it would require 9 days and 9 nights of descent. And even then, I assure you, none would reach its floor. Between them, spanning the yawning chasm between foundation and void, Eros emerged, not merely the love mortals would later come to know, though he was the fundamental, primordial force of attraction, the potency that draws like to like, that compels the scattered dust of creation to coalesce. Taking form, Eros stirred the void, mingling chaos with purpose, unbridled desire with boundless possibility. Thus began the grand work of creation. And Tartarus, already established as the world beneath all worlds, patiently awaited in his eternal gloom the inhabitants who would one day populate his abyssal depths. As this cosmic dance continued, the primordial forces began to assume definite forms. Mother Earth, in her ceaseless creative impulse, birthed Uranus, the starry sky, who stretched above her like a colossal protective blanket. Their mighty union begat the Titans, those first immense divine children who reigned before the age of Olympus. And yet, even as creation flourished in the world above, the great abyss beneath me deepened further still. Unlike the burgeoning upper realms, it remained immutable, eternal, like a dark mirror reflecting the growing brightness of the world. It was here, within this lightless dungeon, that the first seeds of future punishment were sown. For what else was needed for true justice, save a place where the guilty could be confined eternally, with no hope of escape? Erebus and Nyx, night and darkness incarnate, emerged from the primordial gloom like two ancient companions. They bore their children, Ether, the bright, upper air, and Hemera, day. Thus began the endless cycle of light and shadow that would define all mortal experience. However, Nyx maintained her ancient, unbreakable bond with Tartarus. Her shadowy domain intertwined with my abyssal depths in a way that remained mysterious even to the Olympian gods themselves. Time then flowed quite differently, measured not by days but by the waxing and waning of divine ages. The mighty Titans reigned under Cronus, who had overthrown his father Uranus in a brutal act of cosmic violence. But fate, that inexorable spinner of inevitable histories, had already woven the thread that would unravel Cronus's own reign. Zeus, the youngest of the sons, saved from his father's insatiable, devouring hunger, came of age in the secluded caves of Crete. When his time came, he gathered allies among the Titans and unleashed a war that shook the very foundations of reality. For 10 years the cosmos trembled, as the old guard clashed with the new, the roar of thunder against shattering earthquake, ancient tradition against inexorable destiny. The conclusion of that battle came not through strength alone, but through cunning strategy. The youngest son, Zeus, descended into my Tartarus, into that ancient abyssal prison, and freed the Cyclops and Hecatoncheires whom Cronus had imprisoned there. These grateful beings forged for their liberator the weapon of absolute victory, the lightning bolt, which was to become his eternal, fearsome symbol of power. and when the Titans finally fell beneath Zeus's lightning bolts, Tartarus itself consumed them. The primordial deep, patiently awaiting through all the ages of creation, finally found its true, terrifying purpose. The vanquished Titans were cast down into its bottomless voids, where they would remain in eternal confinement. Their unending rage became the bedrock of all future suffering, echoing eternally throughout my domain. Following this crushing victory, the cosmos required new rulers. We, the three brother kings, met to divide all creation among ourselves. Legend speaks of lots cast from a bronze helmet, and that mere chance determined our respective domains. However, fate, as I know full well, has a way of making the inevitable appear accidental. My younger brother, Zeus, the Sky Father, claimed the heavens and the ether for himself, taking his throne atop shining Mount Olympus, whence he could survey all creation. Poseidon, Lord of the Seas, received the vast waters, those mysterious regions where secrecy resided beneath ever-moving waves. And to me, the eldest brother, fell the portion, dominion over the underworld and the realm of the dead. Some whisper that I received the least desirable allotment, that my lot was merely a shadow of my brother's glory. Others contend that power over death always rightfully belonged to the eldest, and the casting of lots was but a formality, a confirmation of my inescapable destiny. Whatever the truth, I accepted my portion with the solemnity and gravity befitting one who would eternally reign over all mortal endings. My descent was both physical and metaphysical. As I descended through countless layers of earth and stone, through caverns that seemed to swallow light itself, I was transformed. The god who had known Olympus's bright golden halls became something else, not darker, but deeper, more attuned to the inevitable gravity of finality that would thenceforth characterize my domain. At last, I reached the very heart of my new kingdom, here where pressure and impenetrable darkness met in an absolute, eternal marriage. I established my throne. Black obsidian and adamant, materials that had never known light, formed my seat of power. Unlike Olympus's dazzling golden thrones, this was substance embodied in primordial solidity, eternal, unyielding, and grim. Around my throne room, space itself seemed to shift and conform to my will. Caverns expanded to accommodate the need for judgment courts. Tunnels branched like arteries, creating pathways for the rivers that would soon flow. The architecture of death was taking its true inevitable form, each element shaped with a singular, inscrutable purpose. I understood my new role completely. While my brothers governed realms of life and motion, my portion was to be the land of silence and eternal memory. No resentment marred my acceptance. For does not all, even the gods themselves, eventually find their way to my dominion? In time, by their inevitable path, I was the most powerful of all. For none, absolutely none, could ultimately escape my sovereignty. Thus was the eternal cosmic order established. Sky, sea, and underworld, each under the governance of its appointed lord. And so began the long, majestic history of the depths beneath me, where all tales ultimately meet their end, and where new, darker stories forever begin their inevitable unfolding. I, Lord of Death, did not simply inherit an empty, lifeless cavern. My new domain demanded rivers to flow, guardians to keep eternal vigil, and clear boundaries to be drawn between the living and those who had passed beyond. From the depths of my newly acquired realm, waters began to emerge. Not ordinary waters, no, but essential currents that would define the very nature of death, its essence. First to materialize was the Styx, the most sacred of all underworld rivers. Born of ancient hatred and divine necessity, its waters held a power that even the mighty Olympians dared not ignore. When the gods sought to bind themselves with unbreakable oaths, they invoked the Styx, whose black, silent flow contained the weight of eternity itself. To break such an oath meant forfeiting divine power for 9 cycles of the sun, a punishment so severe that even Zeus himself honored its unassailable authority. Next flowed the Lethe, the river of oblivion. Its pale, misty waters whispered of disappearance, carrying away memories as surely as time erodes stone. Souls who drank from the Lethe found their earthly concerns dissolving, their past lives becoming as distant and indistinct as dreams upon waking. Some deliberately partook of its waters, seeking release from painful recollections. Others stumbled into its current by chance, losing themselves in its gentle yet inexorable erasure. Then came the Acheron, the river of pain and woe, its waters thick with the echoes of mortal suffering. Its dark, murky currents carried the weight of human sorrow, forming an insurmountable barrier between the living world above and the place of eternal rest below. Unlike the Lethe's gentle disappearance, passage across the Acheron was an act of reckoning, an act of acknowledgement. Every soul had to confront its inevitable mortality, had to feel the full gravity of its end, before continuing its final journey. Fourth to arise was the Phlegethon, the river of fire that blazed but did not consume. Eternal, crimson flames danced upon its liquid surfaces, defying natural laws, creating a current of unbearable heat that purified rather than destroyed. Those destined for punishment would eventually know its searing touch, while others could only glimpse its baleful light from a safe distance, reminding themselves that some aspects of the divine remained beyond mortal comprehension, within my domain. Last to form was the Cocytus, the river of wailing. Here, the very essence of grief flowed as water, carrying the cries and moans of those who mourned. Its icy, relentless current preserved the tears of the departed, creating a permanent record of sorrow that would echo forever through the halls of death. The Cocytus marked the final unbreachable boundary of Tartarus, where the most dire, unbearable punishments awaited those who dared defy divine law. With the establishment of these potent rivers, I, Lord of the Dead, began populating my domain with guardians and servitors, each chosen for their unique abilities to uphold unchanging order in this realm of eternal transit. Charon, the most ancient of ferrymen, was the first to answer my call. Decrepit in appearance, yet eternal by design, he took his post upon the banks of the Styx. His gnarled, calloused hands learned to guide the skiff across treacherous waters, while his sunken, discerning eyes developed the ability to instantly recognize souls worthy of passage. The living feared his grim, impassive countenance, but the dead came to see him as their first, silent guide into a new existence beyond mortality. At the very gates of my realm materialized Cerberus, the three-headed hound, whose very existence defied the laws of nature. Each of his heads served a distinct, unique purpose, one for fearsome guard against the living who might seek unauthorized entry, another to prevent any escape by the dead, and a third to silently greet those whose time had truly come. His booming bark echoed through the caverns with the resonance of finality itself, and even the bravest heroes learned to revere the barriers he tirelessly maintained. Three noble figures stepped forth to serve as judges of the dead. Minos, Rhadamanthus, and Aeacus, each had ruled kingdoms in the world above with unparalleled wisdom and unwavering justice, and now their earthly experience gave them the full right to weigh the lives of those who came before them. Minos, with his shrewd, law-giving mind, could untangle the most complex moral quandaries. Rhadamanthus brought a rigorous adherence to principle, separating good from ill with unwavering clarity, and Aeacus, compassionate yet firm of spirit, understood the weight of circumstance while upholding the high standards of divine justice. Thanatos and Hypnos, death and sleep incarnate, took their places not merely as servitors, but as essential primordial forces. Thanatos moved through the upper world as the embodiment of inevitability, marking the end of each mortal thread at its appointed time. His twin brother brought a softer enfolding darkness, the minor deaths of nightly rest that prepared mortals for their final transition. Together, they bridged the gap between consciousness and oblivion, establishing the unyielding rhythm of mortal existence. The Erinyes, later known as the Furies, embraced their roles as relentless persecutors of wrongdoers. These ancient, vengeful spirits, born from Uranus's blood when Cronus first struck him down, now served me, their new master. Alecto, the relentless, Megara, the grudging, and Tisiphone, the avenger of murder. Their names became chilling whispers of warning among mortals. Unlike other denizens of the underworld, who awaited the arrival of souls, the Erinyes moved freely between realms, mercilessly hunting those whose crimes demanded immediate, divine attention. As these divine appointments proceeded, the very physical structure of the underworld began to mirror its purpose. Stone walls rose without the aid of mortal hands, shaping the judgment halls where my court would preside. Waiting chambers expanded to accommodate the endless, ceaselessly arriving stream of souls. Passages carved themselves through stone, creating labyrinths of paths for the different categories of dead to follow to their ultimate destinations. My throne room itself evolved, transforming beyond its initial formation. Columns of pure, impenetrable darkness supported a ceiling lost in shadow, while the floor was paved with stones of memory, each reflecting glimpses of countless mortal lives that had passed through this sacred chamber. Here I, the Lord of the Dead, was to hear appeals, render judgments, and ceaselessly maintain the fragile balance between mercy and justice that my unrelenting role demanded. At the edges of this majestic constructed dominion, the boundaries solidified. The walls between life and death, once permeable and fluid, now demanded specific passages and permissions. The gates of horn and the gates of ivory appeared, through which true dreams and false visions sometimes ascended to the slumbering world above. These boundaries ensured the proper separation of the two planes of existence, preventing chaos while yet allowing the necessary connections that bound the cosmos together. Piece by piece, then, the underworld transformed from an empty abyss into a fully realized, ordered realm. Each element served multiple purposes: the rivers as boundaries and passages, the guardians as protectors and guides, the structure itself as both symbol and mechanism. The domain of death became a dark mirror of the ordered world above, yet uniquely adapted to its eternal function. Through this meticulous construction, I, the ruler of the dead, ensured that my dominion would serve not merely as a destination, but as a fundamental, inescapable part of the cosmic order. Every mortal born in the world above would eventually find their path leading downward, following these established routes to the afterlife their deeds had earned. The structure was complete. Now it awaited its first true inhabitants. As humanity multiplied upon the earth, the shadow of mortality followed close behind. Disease, old age, and misfortune claimed their first victims, and these souls, hesitant and bewildered, found themselves approaching the boundaries of the living world. There were no pathways for their journey, no customs to guide their transition. My newly fashioned realm of death stood ready, yet the protocols of entry remained unestablished, and chaos multiplied. The children of Prometheus, sculpted from clay and divine breath, these first souls drifted like mist between the worlds. Some lingered by their bodies, unable to comprehend their state. Others wandered aimlessly, knowing they could not return to the lands of the living, yet unsure where to proceed. Cosmic order demanded resolution. It was Hermes, the swift messenger of the gods, who first perceived the pressing need. As souls accumulated in the liminal spaces between planes, he approached me with a proposal. His swift sandals, which carried him between Olympus and earth, could just as readily guide the departed on their final journey. Thus began the tradition of Hermes Psychopomp, the guide of souls, establishing the first formal link between mortal demise and divine destination. The initial journeys were uncertain, fraught with confusion. Early souls resisted their passage, while others rushed too eagerly towards what lay beyond. Hermes learned to read each spirit, offering solace to some and firmness to others. His role evolved from simple conductor to wise counselor, explaining what awaited each soul and preparing them for the judgment they would inevitably face. As more mortals crossed the threshold, patterns emerged in successful transitions. The survivors, observing their loved ones depart, began to notice that certain practices eased the journey, while others complicated it. Trial and error, guided by divine whispers and occasional direct interventions, birthed the fundamental customs of death that persist to this day. The obol, a single coin, placed upon the tongue or eyelids of the deceased, became the first established ritual. Charon, whose skiff required a fare, initially accepted any offerings families could give. However, the standardization of one humble coin ensured that the poorest could afford passage, while simultaneously preventing the wealthy from subverting the process. Burial itself emerged as a pressing necessity, not merely a sentiment. The earliest souls discovered that without proper interment, they remained suspended between existences, unable to complete their journey yet disallowed from returning to life. The earth had to receive the body, completing the dust-to-dust cycle, before the spirit could fully transition to its new domain. Rituals of mourning evolved organically, as the living sought to ease their grief while simultaneously honoring their dead. Libations poured upon the earth forged liquid, symbolic connections between the worlds. Funeral games celebrated the departed life while acknowledging its close. Each emergent custom served both practical and emotional ends, binding the community of the living while easing the journey of the dead. From necessity and divine design, the soul's journey became codified into distinct stages, each with its purpose and trial. Death comes in many forms in the world above. Thanatos might appear as a gentle, fleeting touch upon the shoulder, or as the sudden shock of violence. For some, the severance of body from spirit occurs gradually, like a dream slowly fading. For others, it is instantaneous, yet regardless of method, death marks the beginning of a transition, not an end. Upon severance from the mortal coil, the soul finds itself in a liminal state, still linked to the physical world by memory and emotion, yet inexorably drawn to its ultimate destination. It is here that Hermes appears, his presence both a comfort and an assurance. He does not compel the journey, but guides patiently, allowing each soul time to bid farewell to the world above. The path to the Styx differs for each soul, reflecting their earthly life. Some travel swiftly through familiar landscapes, before those familiar haunts vanish into the misty boundaries between realities. Others must traverse symbolic terrains, crossing metaphorical mountains of regret or lakes of sorrow. Each journey serves as the soul's first reckoning with its own mortality. At the river's edge, the soul first encounters Charon, the ancient ferryman, his sunken gaze holding no judgment, only the acknowledgement of yet another spirit requiring passage. The obol, correctly placed by loved ones, ensures a smooth crossing. Without it, the soul must wait 100 years upon the shores, a penalty for improper burial that underscores the importance of mortal ritual. The crossing itself becomes a meditation on transition. The waters of the Styx divide more than physical locations. They mark the boundary between mortal concerns and eternal perspective. Many souls report feeling the weight of their earthly existence dissolve during this crossing, their priorities shifting as they approach the gates of new existence. Cerberus greets each arrival with his three-headed gaze. Souls of the righteous pass easily, while those who harbor guilt feel the weight of his judgment even before reaching the true courts. His presence serves as both guardian and pre-assessment, ensuring no living creature gains entry to the afterlife while granting the dead their rightful passage. Before the three judges, each soul confronts a moment of ultimate truth. Minos, Rhadamanthus, and Aeacus sit in their appointed places, their divine sight piercing beyond excuses and self-deception to the very essence of each life lived. The process varies with the soul's complexity. Simple lives, marked by clear virtue or obvious depravity, receive swift pronouncements. More nuanced existences demand careful scrutiny, with each action weighed against circumstance and intent. The judges confer amongst themselves in intricate cases, their collective wisdom ensuring that justice prevails over purely technical interpretations of divine law. Stories began to circulate among the living of particularly notable judgments. A soldier, fallen honorably in battle, received immediate passage to Elysium. A merchant who hoarded grain during famine was condemned to eternal hunger in Tartarus's depths. These tales served as both warning and encouragement, shaping mortal conduct through the assurance of cosmic justice. Yet the ultimate destination, once pronounced, cannot be appealed. The word of the three judges is final. Their decision reflects not only mortal law, but the profound harmony of cosmic order. Each soul receives precisely what its life has earned, not through arbitrary punishment or reward, but through the natural consequences of their choices made manifest in eternity. Thus, the standard journey concludes with the soul directed to its final abode. The asphodel fields await the majority, while special regions beckon those marked by exceptional virtue or horrific vice. The protocols established by these first passages would endure for millennia, their necessity proven by the orderly procession of countless souls along the meticulously constructed pathways of the dead. The overwhelming majority of souls required neither the bliss of reward nor the agony of punishment. For them, the common multitude who had lived lives neither of outstanding virtue nor exceptional vice, the asphodel fields materialized like morning mist, slowly taking shape. Gray expanses stretched beyond mortal comprehension, where colorless blooms flowered without scent, swaying in breezes that brought neither warmth nor chill. These endless plains offered the embodiment of neutrality, not suffering, but the eternal absence of the vibrant sensations that defined mortal existence. The sky above remained perpetually twilight, too faint to inspire, too dim to oppress. Here, souls moved in a gentle wandering, their forms mere echoes of their living selves. They drifted past one another like wraiths of memory, sometimes recognizing familiar faces, yet finding themselves unable to rekindle the passionate bonds of their former lives. Time held no meaning where nothing changed. No seasons marked the passage of eternity, no growth or decay punctuated existence. The landscape itself seemed to exist in perpetual neutrality. Streams of lukewarm water wound through fields requiring no tending. Trees bore fruit that provided sustenance without pleasure. The very architecture of this domain ensured that souls experienced neither want nor fulfillment, a perfect balance that many living would deem the ultimate punishment, though it brought no active suffering, in stark contrast to the gray monotony of the Asphodel Plains. At the very edge of the underworld, a territory of golden light began to coalesce. Elysium manifested as the immortal reward for those who had distinguished themselves, whether through heroic deeds, divine favor, or a life lived with extraordinary virtue. Here eternal spring reigned over gentle landscapes. The climate maintained a perfect warmth that neither oppressed nor chilled, while breezes carried the scent of ambrosia and everlasting blossoms. Trees bore perpetually ripe fruit, yet never decayed. Streams of nectar wound through meadows where grass yielded beneath foot, but was not crushed, a province crafted for comfort without monotony. Unlike the aimless wandering of other souls, the blessed inhabitants of Elysium found purpose in eternal pursuits. Warriors who had 9 glorious deaths engaged in simulated battles where none truly fell. Poets composed verses that captured divine truth. Athletes competed in games where victory brought honor without diminishing the vanquished. Each soul could engage in whatever had brought it fulfillment in life, now freed from mortal limitations. The blessed fields even offered connections between their inhabitants and the world above. Unlike other souls, who forgot their mortal ties through the waters of the Lethe, the denizens of Elysium retained awareness of their descendants, and could occasionally influence events in the living world. They became ancestral spirits, guides who whispered wisdom and protection to their mortal progeny. Some souls found such fulfillment here that they chose to remain eternally. Others, however, chose to drink from the Lethe's waters and return for additional lives, seeking to prove their virtue anew. This very choice distinguished Elysium. It offered possibility, where other regions offered only acceptance of fate. While pleasant territories were forming above, the ancient abyss continued to evolve into the fundamental zone of punishment. Tartarus surpassed mere confinement. It became a domain designed for highly specific torments, precisely matching each transgressor's crimes. The geography shifted to accommodate necessity. Obsidian cliffs rose to contain those destined to eternally push boulders. Lakes of fire formed for those who betrayed sacred hospitality. Wheels of burning bronze appeared for those who dared divine aspirations. This territory became a workshop where divine justice crafted perfect retributions, each one calibrated to reflect the exact nature of the offense committed. Tantalus was the first to discover his eternal frustration. The former king, who had served his own son to the gods in a feast, found himself standing in a pool beneath fruit trees. When thirst drove him to drink, the waters receded. When hunger compelled him to reach for fruit, the branches lifted beyond his grasp. This punishment, to eternally desire what remained perpetually out of reach, became the archetype of divine retribution. Sisyphus, master of cunning, who twice evaded death by virtue of his cleverness, learned that even knowledge had its limits. His boulder, perfectly suited for one man to move, proved impossible to push past the hill's summit. Each nearly successful attempt ended in failure as the stone rolled back, forcing him to begin anew. The punishment perfectly mirrored the futility of trying to outwit the very cosmic order. Ixion's wheel of fire punished hubris in motion rather than in stillness. Bound to its burning spokes for attempting to seduce a divine queen, he spun eternally, knowing no rest, save for brief moments when the flames dimmed to embers before rekindling. His punishment became a paradigm for those who mistook mortal status for divine privilege. The Danaids, those 50 sisters who murdered their husbands on their wedding night, faced eternal frustration. Forced to fill a vast jar using perforated vessels, they experienced the futility of seeking redemption for intentional violence. Their punishment implied that some crimes created their own unending cycles, requiring the soul to repeat its failures until it grasped the immutable nature of justice. Each punishment served multiple purposes: specific torment for the guilty, a warning to potential transgressors, and a demonstration that divine justice operated beyond mortal comprehension. The realm expanded as needed, generating new torments for unique crimes while maintaining its core character as the cosmos's ultimate judicial chamber. Tartarus achieved its full complexity when various levels appeared within its depths. The greater the crime, the deeper the penalty. Traitors to families sank lowest of all, to where even the dim light filtering into the upper levels could not reach. The architecture of agony became a reflection of moral hierarchy, ensuring that souls faced consequences proportionate to their transgressions. As these distinct provinces asserted themselves, the boundaries between them crystallized. No mere walls could separate such disparate zones of existence. Instead, the very fabric of the afterlife shifted in quality from one region to another. Rivers continued to serve as transitional zones. Souls bound for the asphodel meadows found themselves borne by gentle currents that gradually muted their memories of mortal life. Those destined for Elysium experienced waters that refreshed rather than diminished, preparing them for the enhanced existence that awaited. The darkest souls, confronting Tartarus, found the rivers themselves mirroring their punishment. The scorching waters of the Phlegethon offered no passage, only a foretaste of the eternal fire that awaited. The Cocytus froze more solidly the deeper they tried to traverse it, its icy grip tightening with moral weight. Geographical features emerged, serving as landmarks and barriers. The plain of judgment formed a neutral ground where souls could contemplate their lives before final assignment. The hills of memory offered elevated views of the different regions, allowing souls to fully grasp what they were leaving behind or approaching. Passageways materialized that prevented improper crossings. Souls from one zone could not transition to another without divine permission. A necessary restraint that ensured the justice of each assignment remained intact. These passages shifted and changed according to need, creating a dynamic geography that reflected the living nature of cosmic justice. Thus, the underworld transformed from a singular dominion into a complex tapestry of interconnected territories. Each zone fulfilled its purpose within the whole, ensuring that every soul found precisely what its life had deserved. The architecture of the afterlife achieved its final form, ready to serve the endless procession of mortal ends to follow. The cosmic order had found defined form, and yet the realm of death remained strangely solitary. While my brethren ruled with divine consorts by their sides, I, the Lord of Shadows, sat alone over my dominion. The weight of this solitude was soon to alter not only my domain but the very rhythm of mortal existence on the earth above. In the world of light, Demeter's daughter roamed the fields of eternal spring. Persephone, whose name meant bringer of destruction, gathered flowers among the narcissus and crocus, her youthful laughter echoing across meadows that knew no winter. She moved through the living world as the embodiment of life's promise, a maiden rather than a mother, spring rather than autumn, possibility rather than memory. From the depths where I dwelled, eyes observed her dance in the sunlit fields. The solitude of the underworld had become unbearable to me, and in Persephone's graceful movements I recognized a kindred spirit, one who moved between light and shadow, whose very name spoke of transmutation. With Zeus's tacit consent, but unknown to Demeter, a plan formed. The earth split open like a hungry mouth as the maiden reached for a particularly beautiful flower. From this chasm emerged a chariot of ebony, drawn by steeds whose breath was mist, whose hooves struck sparks from the very air. Before her startled cry could fully form, Persephone found herself swept into a darkness deeper than any she had known. She was borne away by hands that radiated the cold of eternity. The harvest goddess sensed her daughter's absence before any mortal cry reached her ears. Demeter's divine nature resonated with the wound inflicted upon the fabric of mother-child connection. Her search began immediately, carrying her from mountain peak to ocean depth, questioning every creature and spirit on her desperate path. As her search continued fruitless, something fundamental shifted in the earth's fertility. Fields that had been green began to blanch, their life essence draining away like breath from a dying creature. Animals ceased to mate and bear young. Rivers slowed to sullen trickles. The very soil seemed to prepare itself to yield no food, matching its goddess's growing despair. Demeter's wanderings led her to realms both mortal and divine. She questioned Helios, the sun god, who saw all beneath the sky. She sought wisdom from Hecate, the sorceress goddess, who knew the ways between worlds. Each answer brought her closer to the truth, though none provided the reunion she desperately sought. Meanwhile, humanity watched in growing horror as their crops withered and their livestock weakened. 9 days and nights she searched without rest, taking neither ambrosia nor nectar, her divine radiance dimming with each fruitless hour. And when the truth finally unveiled itself, that my brother had sanctioned her daughter's abduction, I saw Demeter's fury transform the world. The earth would no longer yield fruit. Let gods and mortals alike experience a barrenness befitting her heart. Famine spread like a blight across the living world. Cities that had prospered began to starve. Temples stood empty as farmers abandoned fields that produced no harvest. The cosmic balance teetered on the brink of catastrophe. For without mortal worship and sacrifice, even the Olympians would feel the dearth of power. At last, Zeus recognized the approaching disaster. The king of the gods could not allow mortality to vanish entirely. For who, then, would venerate the divine? Hermes received his commission as messenger. He was tasked with retrieving the maiden from the depths. However, the laws of the cosmos operated on principles that even Zeus could not ignore. I watched as Hermes descended the now familiar paths to my court. There, he found not the grieving captive he expected, but a young goddess beginning to understand the power of her new dominion. Persephone had eaten, some accounts say 3, others 7, pomegranate seeds. This fruit, whose red pulp mimicked the color of life itself, this simple action bound her to my realm. By ancient law, one could not partake of the food of the dead and return unchanged to the living. Yet, neither could the world above continue without Demeter's blessing. The solution required compromise, a balance between absolute extremes. The agreement struck contained the wisdom of necessity. Persephone would spend equal time in both worlds, part of each year ascending to reunite with her mother in the world of light, part returning to rule beside me, her shadowy husband, in the depths below. The precise division varies by source. Some say equal halves, others a third in darkness and 2/3 in light. This cosmic contract established a rhythm that would define mortal experience. When Persephone rose from the underworld each spring, Demeter's joy manifested in the earth's renewal. Flowers bloomed, creatures mated, and fields became fertile once more. When the queen-daughter descended again, her mother's grief turned the world to autumn and winter. The union between myself, the Dark Lord, and the Spring Maiden created more than seasonal changes. Within the dark halls of death a different power blossomed. Persephone, no longer the innocent wanderer of flower fields, evolved into a figure of dual nature. She retained the warmth of spring but gained authority over ends. As queen of the dead, she brought changes to the afterlife itself. Her presence softened some aspects of my realm while deepening others. The gloom of the asphodel meadows took on subtle shades of gray. In Elysium, new gardens appeared, where blessed souls could tend to plants that bloomed with the fragrance of memory. Even punishment in Tartarus gained the context of seasons, moments of respite when Persephone's influence caused the eternal torments to pause, if only briefly. Our marriage also established new protocols for the living's interaction with the dead. Persephone became a kind of intercessor, more approachable than I, her stern husband. Mothers who lost children could pray to her for comfort, knowing she understood the pain of separation. Those who sought to connect with deceased loved ones found her more inclined to grant brief encounters in the hours when she stepped on the threshold between worlds. In this sacred union, ancient forces merged in a new way. The fertility of earth now carried the weight of inevitable endings. Every blade of grass contained the seed of its own decay. Every birth implied death, and every death carried the promise of renewal. The cosmic dance found its eternal rhythm, with Persephone moving like a living thread connecting above and below. Her throne, carved from crystalline stone holding light within its depths, stood beside my obsidian couch. Together, we ruled the sanctuary of ends. She, with an understanding of life's vigor, I, with a solemn knowledge of its inevitable conclusion. Our court became the fullest expression of the duality that governed existence itself. Thus, the underworld gained not merely a queen, but a bridge between realms that had previously stood in rigid separation. Through her, the living and the dead maintained a constant connection, and the world above found meaning in the pattern of its own seasons. The cosmic order achieved a completeness it had previously lacked, with even death itself participating in the endless cycle of renewal. The rhythm of the seasons was established, and yet the boundaries between the living and the dead were not merely observed, they were challenged. Throughout the ages, certain figures dared to breach that division. Their journeys created legends that echoed through both realms. These heroes, driven by love, duty, or divine command, found that the dominion of death held passages for the living, though the price for them remained high. Among mortal champions, none possessed strength to rival Zeus's son. When King Eurystheus commanded him to perform his 12th and final labor, to bring Cerberus himself to the world above, even the hardened heroes gathered at the court gasped in disbelief. No one had ever returned from attempting to subdue Death's guardian, let alone defeat him. The hero's preparation for this descent notably differed from previous quests. Instead of armor and weapons, he draped himself in the lion's hide that offered protection from both natural and supernatural forces. His divine heritage manifested this time not in rage, but in careful diplomacy as he approached the shadowy borders. Athena and Hermes accompanied him on the initial descent, their divine presence allowing him to pass the first guardians without conflict. They taught him to discern between inhabitants and prisoners, voluntary dwellers and those caught by circumstance. The hero quickly learned that in this realm, knowledge served better than might, and when at last he stood before the three-headed monster, Heracles offered the respect due to one who performed an important duty. He requested permission for the trial, rather than demanding passage by force. This approach drew my attention, and I, the Lord of Death, set a condition. The hero must subdue Cerberus using neither weapon nor divine artifacts, only his own strength and will. The struggle that ensued shook the foundations of the darkest caverns. 3 jaws snapped at the hero's throat, and a serpent's tail lashed like lightning. Heracles grappled with the thick necks, focusing his legendary might. Avoiding the venomous bites, the struggle continued for what seemed an eternity, until gradually the mighty hound acknowledged a force superior to his own. Victory belonged to the mortal son of gods, but wisdom came later. Heracles understood that this victory could not be permanent. Cerberus belonged at his post, upholding the cosmic order. The hero's journey to the surface brought temporary disruption. Mortals scattered in terror at the sight of Death's guardian under open skies. But Heracles fulfilled his promise, returning the beast to his rightful post. While might could forge a path into the afterlife, music possessed more subtle yet equally irresistible powers. Orpheus, whose lyre could charm stones and tame wild beasts, found that even the hardened hearts of immortals could succumb to a perfect melody when grief was its source. Eurydice's death came swiftly, a serpent's bite during the very wedding celebration. The renowned musician watched his beloved fade before his vows could be fully uttered, and in his sorrow, he conceived a plan that seemed impossible for any but himself. His divine heritage through Calliope, chief of the Muses, gave him confidence that his gift could accomplish what force never could. His descent followed a different path than that of warriors. Orpheus needed no guide, for his music created its own illumination in the darkness. Crossing the Styx required no coin. Charon found himself rowing in time to melodies that spoke of life's fleeting beauty. Cerberus, lulled by songs of loneliness and loss, allowed passage without resistance. Before my throne, Orpheus wove his masterpiece. His lyre sang of love that transcended mortality, of devotion that could not accept death's finality. The notes carried memories of shared joys and the promise of future happiness denied by cruel fate. For the first time in an eternity, tears gathered in divine eyes as I, the Lord of Death, found myself moved by mortal emotion. Persephone, freshly returned from the world above, added her voice to the plea. She recognized in Orpheus's devotion the same love that bound her to Demeter, the same power that made her yearly parting so painful. I, the King of Shadows, yielding to my queen's gentle entreaty and the musician's extraordinary talent, granted Eurydice's unprecedented return to life. However, divine grace was wrapped in a caution. One condition bound the gift. Orpheus must walk ahead, never looking back until both were under the full warmth of sunlight. Trust in the divine promise must be complete. Faith, unwavering. The musician eagerly agreed, hearing his beloved's footsteps behind him as they ascended the winding passages to the surface. The final moments proved fate's cruelty. Just as the first rays of sunlight touched his face, doubt crept into Orpheus's heart. The silence behind him felt too complete. In a fatal instant before fully emerging into the light, he turned to confirm Eurydice followed, and watched in horror as she dissolved back into shadow. His cry of despair echoed between realms, a sound so pure in its sorrow that it changed the very acoustics of the underworld. There would be no second chance. The laws of death, once breached, could not be broken entirely. Orpheus returned alone to the world above, his music forever changed by the knowledge of what he had gained and lost. His subsequent wanderings, his eventual death at the hands of those who could not bear beauty tinged with such sadness, all stemmed from that single glance back, that moment when doubt overcame divine trust, Where love moved gods to mercy, hubris invoked their wrath. Two heroes, bound by friendship and excessive pride, conceived a plan so audacious it challenged the most fundamental order. Theseus, king of Athens, and Pirithous, ruler of Thessaly, decided to abduct not just any divine maidens, but the queen of the underworld herself. Their plan unfolded seemingly logically. Having successfully challenged monsters and defeated enemies, they believed themselves worthy of divine brides. Pirithous first proposed abducting Helen of Sparta, Zeus's daughter by a mortal mother. This first crime succeeded through force and deception. Though they agreed Helen would go to Theseus as compensation for his help in securing the greater prize, the descent for Persephone began boldly. The heroes believed their reputations preceded them, that tales of their deeds had impressed even the Lord of Shadows. They expected honors befitting champions, perhaps even respectful negotiations for the queen's hand. Their overconfidence blinded them to the impossibility of their goal. No mortal could possess one who ruled by divine right. My reception bore the stamp of cosmic mockery. I offered them seats befitting noble guests, the chairs of forgetfulness. Their magical properties instantly bound them, their flesh growing into the living stone as memory leaked from their minds like water through broken vessels. They became part of the very furniture, eternal warnings against divine transgression. As they sat in growing amnesia, I, the King of Shadows, arranged my own lesson. Servants laid out feasts before the paralyzed heroes. Feasts they could see but could not touch. Persephone would sometimes pass by, her regal bearing a constant reminder of the folly that had led to their downfall. Time lost meaning as they became permanent fixtures. Their legendary strength was useless, like mortal weapons in this realm. Heracles, during his descent for the 12th labor, stumbled upon his cousin Theseus by chance. The hero found himself torn between friendship and respect for the divine order. Using strength amplified by divine heritage, he managed to wrench Theseus free, though not without cost. The king of Athens left parts of his flesh behind, bearing eternal scars of his recklessness. Pirithous remained forever on that chair, his ambition earning him permanent residence in the very realm he thought to conquer. The chair became part of the underworld's architecture, a cautionary tale made physical. Future souls would pass by and wonder at the figure frozen in stone, a testament to mortal hubris facing divine justice. Where heroes failed through force or pride, a mortal succeeded through humility and love. Psyche, whose beauty drew the eye of Venus herself, found herself embroiled in divine intrigue that would ultimately lead her to immortality through proper appeasement. The goddess of love, envious of mortal beauty rivaling her own, commanded her son, Cupid, to make Psyche fall in love with the most hideous creature imaginable. However, the young god, seeing the maiden's true charm, accidentally pricked himself with his own arrow. Thus began a divine romance hidden in shadow and secrecy, where Psyche loved an unseen husband who visited her only in darkness. When, swayed by familial curiosity, she broke a sacred taboo, Psyche lost both her lover and the dream palace where they had lived in bliss. Seeking reconciliation with Venus, she found herself subjected to impossible tasks, each designed to affirm her unworthiness. The final test struck at the heart of divine pride: to retrieve beauty from Persephone herself. Armed with divine counsel secretly passed by sympathetic gods, Psyche descended more carefully than the heroes who preceded her. She carried specific provisions: barley cakes to placate Cerberus, coins to pay Charon. More importantly, she carried instructions to resist temptation, to ignore a lame man asking for help with a donkey, to refuse a drowning hand begging for aid, to reject a feast laid out for her by Persephone's servants. Each temptation avoided tested different aspects of her character. Compassion might have been her undoing. However, cold resolve served a higher purpose. When she finally stood before me, the queen of the underworld, her humility proved more disarming than any hero's might. Persephone, seeing in the mortal maiden a reflection of her own battles between realms, willingly granted the requested gift of beauty, contained within a sealed box. The return journey required equal caution, with one final proscription: not to open the divine vessel herself. Yet feminine curiosity, the same trait that had cost her a divine husband, nearly proved her undoing. Unable to resist the promise of celestial beauty, Psyche opened the box and found not cosmetic enhancement, but Stygian slumber, a death-like stupor meant for goddesses, not mortals. Only Cupid's intervention saved her, for he pleaded with his father Zeus for permission to openly declare his love. The young pair's ascent to Olympus transformed Psyche from mortal to immortal. Her trials earned her divine status where a hero's strength could not achieve the same. Her story became a paradigm, showing that the right approach, a humble acceptance of divine will, could achieve what strength and pride never could. While most heroes sought the realm of death for personal gain, some descended seeking wisdom for the greater good. Odysseus, adrift due to a vengeful Poseidon, needed prophetic guidance that only the dead could provide. His journey to the edge of the world where day met night at the borders of Erebus was to unlock secrets vital to his return home. Unlike others, he did not need to fully enter death's dominion. Instead, he performed rites at the boundary, drawing spirits to him through sacrifice and ritual. The hero dug a trench with his bronze sword, poured libations of honey, wine, and water, then sprinkled white barley. He invoked the spirits of the dead, calling to them, sacrificing animals, letting their blood fill the trench. First to appear was Elpenor, his recently deceased companion, who had perished unceremoniously on Circe's island. This encounter immediately taught Odysseus the importance of proper burial. Even the realm of death operated on codes of honor and respect. He promised proper funeral rites, establishing that the living maintained duties to the dead, even across the cosmic chasm. Next came his mother, Anticlea. Her shade revealed that news of her son's return had never reached Ithaca. Her grief at his long absence had hastened her own death, a burden that weighed on the hero's conscience. Through tears, she could only recognize him after drinking the blood that gave temporary substance to the ghostly forms. The spirit of Agamemnon brought warnings. His queen Clytemnestra had murdered him upon his return from Troy, teaching Odysseus caution for his own homecoming. Achilles appeared, teaching a lesson on glory versus life itself. Better to serve as a slave among the living than to rule legions of the dead. The prophet Tiresias, blind in life and after death, yet seeing more clearly than all others, pointed the way home. His prophecy came with warnings of the sirens, Scylla and Charybdis, Helios's sacred cattle. Most importantly, he foretold the need for further pilgrimage even after reaching Ithaca, for Poseidon's wrath required additional appeasement. Ajax the Lesser appeared last, still nursing resentment from their quarrel over Achilles' armor. Though Odysseus pleaded for reconciliation, some souls preferred their fury to peace, retaining their earthly passions beyond mortality. This reminded the hero that death did not automatically bring wisdom or forgiveness. Souls carried their essential selves into the shadowy realm. The Nechaia concluded as a multitude of shadows began to approach, drawn by the blood that gave them temporary coherence. Odysseus, understanding that some mysteries remained too awful for mortal comprehension, hastily returned to his ship. His descent granted crucial knowledge, while also showing that death's secrets were best experienced in their own time. Among all mortal descents, none carried greater cosmic significance than Aeneas's passage into the Underworld. Guided by the Cumaean Sibyl through an entrance near Lake Avernus, the Trojan hero sought not personal gain, but knowledge of his people's destiny. His journey literally charted Rome's future across the landscape of death. The Sibyl's preparation differed from that of previous descenders. She required Aeneas to obtain the Golden Bough, sacred to Diana, and a passport into the nether realms. This mystical branch, plucked from a dark grove near Cumae, became the prototypical symbol of mortal authority to enter death's dominion. Not by force or music, but by possession of the correct divine token. His tour of the afterlife served an educational purpose. The Sibyl pointed out specific areas where the souls of infants awaited, where the unjustly condemned found justice, where those who died for love received solace. Aeneas witnessed the judgment process in full detail, understanding divine justice as a complex system rather than merely reward and punishment. The fields of mourning impacted him deeply when he met Dido, the queen he had abandoned in pursuit of his destiny. Her refusal to acknowledge him, turning away to rejoin the shade of her first husband, taught him a lesson in the enduring power of committed love. Some wounds, even a divine mission, could not fully heal. In the blessed groves of Elysium, Aeneas finally found his father, Anchises. Their reunion held both personal joy and prophetic revelation. Anchises explained the soul's process of purification and reincarnation, pointing out the future heroes of Rome awaiting birth. He unveiled names that would echo through history, Romulus, Caesar, Augustus, showing destiny embodied through genealogical vision. The philosophy laid out in the Aeneid revolutionized the understanding of the underworld. Souls underwent cycles of purification and return, accumulating wisdom through multiple lives until they achieved final rest in eternal light. This concept of reincarnation, blended with the traditional Greek afterlife, would influence both Roman religious thought and subsequent philosophical traditions. The exit from the underworld carried its own meaning, while others struggled to return via the paths they had entered. Aeneas departed through the Gate of Ivory, a portal of false dreams. This enigmatic choice suggested that even prophetic truth contained elements of deception or multiple interpretation, that the future revealed required human action for proper manifestation. His ascent reconnected him with divine purpose. The journey through the underworld transformed him from refugee leader to nation founder. The visions gave him perspective, an understanding that his personal losses served a greater destiny, that the fall of Troy allowed Rome to rise. This profound acceptance of the cosmic order prepared him for the challenges that would shape an empire. Thus, these heroic descents established the principle that the realm of death, though forbidden to the living, remained accessible under proper circumstances. Each journey left its mark on both realms, altering the underworld's protocols while providing crucial knowledge to the world above. The stories served as paradigms, teaching that approach outweighed might, that respect for divine order surpassed mortal desire, and that sometimes the journey to death offered the deepest understanding of life. These heroic passages revealed that the realm of death was not merely a static destination. As mortal understanding grew through these legendary journeys, the shadowy domain itself expanded in scope and character. New divine entities emerged. Lesser deities assumed their posts, and the mythology surrounding death developed layers that reflected the deepening Greek theological imagination. Beyond the central figures who had ruled since the cosmic separation, other immortal forces found their roles within the expanding hierarchy of the realm of death. These additions reflected both the complexity of death itself and the growing sophistication of mortal understanding. Hecate, the ancient goddess of crossroads and magic, asserted her authority at the thresholds where worlds intersected. Her position differed from that of the perpetually resident deities. She moved freely between realms. Her triple form was equally at home beneath the earth, on land, and in the heavens above. Her torches illuminated the darkest passages, while her knowledge encompassed both the hidden paths to death's domain and the secret ways back to life. The crossroads she governed were both literal and metaphorical. Physically, they marked places where myriad paths converged in the underworld's complex geography. Spiritually, they represented moments of choice that determined the ultimate fate of souls. Hecate became the patroness of those who worked at these frontiers: necromancers, midwives, and others who dealt with beginnings and endings. Her ritual practices introduced new elements into interaction with the dead. Monthly offerings at tripartite crossroads evolved into elaborate ceremonies. Hecate's suppers, consisting of garlic, fish, honey cakes, and eggs, served as communal meals shared between the living and the departed. These rites established protocols for ongoing contact that earlier eras could not have conceived. Belinoe manifested as a figure both terrifying and sacred. Her role arose from the darker aspects of Persephone's dual nature. When the spring goddess descended to her winter throne, she sometimes bore daughters who inherited specific attributes. Belinoe embodied the nightmarish aspect of the underworld, appearing to bring madness and dread to those who had escaped proper justice in life. Unlike spirits bound to the shadowy realm, Belinoe moved primarily in the world above. Her appearance heralded the dissolution of the mortal mind. She emerged as a figure half shrouded in darkness, half illuminated by moonlight, her presence inducing the same waking dread previously associated only with guilty dreams. Some traditions identified her as a child Persephone bore to Zeus in secret. Conceived during one of the Sky Father's transformations into a semblance of death, her relationship with proper justice was complex. She pursued not only the impious, but also those whose guilt remained unrecognized or unpunished by human law. Her visits could compel kings to confess secret crimes or force murderers to reveal themselves through madness. Thus she served as an extension of underworld justice into the mortal sphere. The Moirai, Clotho, Lachesis, and Atropos retained their ancient authority while developing deeper connections with the realm of death. These fates, who spun, measured, and cut the threads of mortal life, presided over when souls would arrive at the shadowy gates. Even I, the ruler of death, acknowledged their power, for they were subject to no temporal force. Their actions existed outside linear time. In their cave at the edge of the world, they saw past, present, and future simultaneously. When a soul arrived in the underworld, its destined path was already woven into the cosmic tapestry. This predetermination did not negate the need for judgment, but rather ensured that each soul's ultimate destination aligned with the pattern they had always intended. Their tools acquired mythological significance beyond simple metaphor. Clotho's spindle drew material from the infinite possibility of unformed souls. Lachesis' measuring rod determined the length and character of each mortal span. Atropos' shears, made of metals not extant in the mortal world, could sever any thread, regardless of its presumed strength or protective enchantments. Nyx herself retained her ancient connections with the chthonic domain. This primeval night, mother of both Thanatos and Hypnos, served as a bridge between the earliest chaos and the ordered cosmos. Her dark, star-studded raiment could grant passage through barriers that even divine power sometimes could not overcome. Her dwelling at the edge of darkness existed in multiple locations simultaneously: a cave entrance near the realm of death, a palace beyond Atlas's garden, and stations along the night sky. From these vantage points she observed both mortal and immortal actions, sometimes offering counsel to me, the Lord of Shadows, when cosmic precedent conflicted with true justice. As underworld mythology matured, a myriad of minor figures emerged, each weaving threads into the intricate narrative fabric of death's domain. Their stories often began in the world above but found resolution below, forging bridges between realms that enriched the overall mythological framework. The story of Alcestis became paradigmatic for voluntary death in substitution for another. When death came for King Admetus, his devoted wife offered herself as a replacement, transforming a domestic tragedy into a testing of divine boundaries. Apollo, who had received hospitality from the royal house, negotiated a reprieve from death on the condition of finding a substitute. The journey downward proceeded with unusual elements. Unlike those who resisted their fate, Alcestis went voluntarily to take her husband's destined place. Her arrival caused uncertainty among the guardians of my realm. Here was one who chose death not from defeat or punishment, but from the triumph of love. Ordinary protocols seemed insufficient for such unprecedented devotion. Her eventual rescue by Heracles during one of his adventures added layers to the story. The hero's struggle with death itself created a new precedent. Even Thanatos could be overcome when divine will and mortal virtue appropriately aligned. Alcestis' return to life carried metaphorical weight. One who had touched death but returned became a living symbol of sacrifice rewarded. Ajax the Lesser bore an eternal punishment for hubris of a different kind. After the sack of Troy, he dragged Cassandra from Athena's altar, violating the sacred sanctuary meant to protect the prophetess. Though he escaped immediate death, his crime demanded cosmic justice that mortal courts could not provide. During his sea voyage home, Athena raised storms that wrecked his ships, however, defying both divine punishment and the sea itself. Ajax's pride pushed boundaries even further. He boasted that he would survive despite the will of the gods, that mortal might could overcome any divine plan. This final blasphemy led to his demise. When Poseidon split the very rock he clung to, his shade in the underworld bore unique characteristics. While most spirits accepted their fate after death, Ajax retained his defiance eternally. He refused to enter the established regions of the afterlife, instead haunting the fringes between realms, an eternal reminder that some souls resist cosmic order even in death. His example showed that identity could persist beyond bodily dissolution. The transformation of Minthe created a different kind of underworld legend. This water nymph, dwelling by the river Cocytus, attracted the attention of my realm, the Dark King. Their relationship predated my union with Persephone, representing early connections between death's domains and the natural forces of the living world. When Persephone arrived as queen, she discovered evidence of a previous attachment and responded with divine jealousy. Various accounts varied the specific method. Was it Demeter who trampled Minthe into aromatic herbs, or Persephone herself who enacted the transformation? The result remained constant. The nymph became a mint plant, her essence permeating the winds that flowed between the upper and lower worlds. The herb's properties carried metaphorical significance. Its pungent scent could mask the odor of decay associated with the realm of death. Its stimulating qualities helped maintain awareness during descents into the shadowy depths. Its resilience in growth, even in poor conditions, suggested nature's ability to thrive despite proximity to death's domain. The ultimate arrival of Orpheus in the underworld resonated with his earlier descent. After wandering as a broken poet, rejected by a world that had witnessed his failure, he met death at the hands of the Maenads during a Dionysian frenzy. The spirits of the murdered muses tore him apart, scattering pieces that would ultimately reunite in the shadowy realm. His reception was notably different from his first visit. Instead of standing as a supplicant before the judgment thrones, he took a place among the blessed in Elysium. His tragic fate and divine lineage earned him special consideration. Though his musical gifts continued to enrich the afterlife, reunion with Eurydice proved complex. She had moved beyond direct reach, transformed by time and experience in such a way that even Orpheus' music could not entirely bridge the gap. These minor stories enriched the texture of the underworld, showing how personal dramas played out against the backdrop of cosmic law. Each narrative added nuances to the established order. Alcestis proved that love could temporarily override death's claims. Ajax demonstrated that defiance could persist beyond mortal dissolution. Minthe showed the power of transformation at the border of realms, and Orpheus completed his journey from mortal artist to eternal resident. As the underworld matured, the roles of its primary inhabitants evolved beyond their initial definitions. The complexity of the realm demanded specialization, and the deities developed specific functions that addressed the increasingly sophisticated relationships between the living and the dead. The Erinyes transformed from mere avengers into agents of gradual purification. While maintaining the traditional pursuit of the unpunished guilty, they developed methods for eventual reconciliation. The caves where they tormented evildoers became classrooms, where souls learned to grasp the full implications of their crimes. This educational aspect suggested that even the most dreadful punishments served higher purposes, not merely retribution. Their methodology expanded to include graduated intensity. Those who showed genuine remorse faced lighter trials than the entirely unrepentant. They began working collaboratively with the judges, crafting punishment programs tailored to specific transgressions. Intrafamilial murders still received the harshest treatment, but even these souls now had theoretical paths to eventual peace. The duties of Charon, the ferryman, expanded beyond simple transport. As he accumulated experience through ferrying countless souls, he developed the ability to read spiritual states, to sense which arrivals had proper burial rites, and which had to wait a century on the bank. His boat itself acquired semi-conscious qualities, reacting to moral weight, gliding smoothly for the righteous, becoming dangerously unstable for murderers. He began serving as a preliminary counselor during transit. His taciturn nature sometimes interrupted to offer wisdom distilled from observing millions of mortal demises. Some souls arrived thinking death meant an end. Charon's experience taught them to perceive it as a transition. His role expanded to psychological preparation for the coming judgment. Cerberus also evolved beyond a mere guard. His three heads developed distinct personalities and purposes, one that recognized legitimate passages, one that detected unauthorized entries, and one that sensed souls attempting to escape their assigned realms. This specialization made him not merely a barrier, but a sophisticated filter, ensuring the correct flow of spirits according to divine law. The great hound's bark developed variations commensurate with its function. Souls arriving with proper escort heard only a low growl, acknowledging their right to passage. Living heroes attempting unauthorized entry received the full force of his terrifying howl. His mere presence became a teacher, instructing arrivals that the realm of death operated by established protocols, not arbitrary authority. Persephone's role deepened beyond seasonal transitions to become a protector of specific souls. Her experience of violent separation from the world above gave her unique empathy for those whose deaths came suddenly or unjustly. She developed interventions that could alleviate certain sufferings without violating the overall order of justice. Her judicial sessions evolved into opportunities for special pleading. Mothers who died in childbirth could receive her particular attention. Those who sacrificed themselves for others found in her a powerful advocate during judgment. Her influence never overrode the fundamental justice of my realm, but added a dimension of mercy to what might otherwise have been a rigid application of cosmic law. I myself grew from a figure inspiring terrifying finality into something more complex, a judge, an administrator, and a guarantor of cosmic balance. My authority expanded to include not only ruling the dead, but ensuring that death itself fulfilled its proper function throughout the universe. I became the guarantor that demises came at their appointed time, neither too early nor too late. My court evolved beyond simple pronouncement into careful inquiry. Complex cases now received full hearings where souls could present their life circumstances. My judgments began to incorporate an understanding that mortal existence rarely offered clear moral choices, that lives were woven from countless threads of intention, circumstance, and consequence. Thus, the divine inhabitants of the underworld evolved into roles that balanced justice with understanding, punishment with the possibility of redemption, and finality with a recognition of the complexity of existence. The realm of death attained a sophistication commensurate with the mortal understanding that sought to grasp it, creating a theological system where the end served as a beginning, and death illuminated life's essential meaning. The complexity of the underworld grew beyond a mere destination for the dead. It became a source of sacred wisdom, capable of transforming mortal life itself. Various mystery traditions emerged. Each offering initiates a particular understanding of the nature of death, and through that knowledge, an altered perspective on existence itself. These secret rites forged bridges between popular religion and philosophical inquiry, between myth and mystical experience. In Eleusis, a small town northwest of Athens, the ancient story of Persephone's descent crystallized into rituals that promised transformative insight. These mysteries, celebrated for nearly 2,000 years, attracted devotees from across the Greek world. Kings and commoners alike sought initiation into mysteries that offered not only hope for a better afterlife, but an altered understanding of life's purpose. The lesser mysteries, held in early spring at Agra, served as preliminary purification. Initiates underwent cleansing in river waters, sacrificed young pigs as surrogate offerings, and learned the basic mythological narratives that framed the greater revelations to come. These preparatory rites ensured that participants approached the greater mysteries with proper reverence and readiness. The journey to Eleusis for the autumn festival followed the path Demeter presumably took in search of her lost daughter. Pilgrims walked the sacred way, stopping at designated shrines where they performed specific rituals. The procession itself became a moving meditation on separation and reunion, with participants physically retracing divine steps along the sacred road. Within the Telesterion, the great hall of initiation, the greater mysteries unfolded. Though participants took binding oaths of secrecy, certain elements can be reconstructed from fragments and illusions. Central to the experience was a reenactment of Persephone's story through sacred drama. Initiates witnessed performances of descent, separation, search, and reunion that carried metaphorical weight beyond their literal narrative. The culminating revelation involved what was called the things shown, deichnomena. This visual component likely included sacred objects displayed under dramatic lighting, perhaps replicas of items Persephone encountered in the underworld, or symbols representing the journey between life and death. The experience transcended mere observation, creating a sense of participation in divine mysteries that transformed the participants' worldview. The impact of initiation was reported to bring profound peace regarding death. Those who experienced the Eleusinian visions emerged with altered consciousness, understanding mortality not as an end but as a transformation, akin to a seed becoming a harvest. They learned to perceive death through the agricultural cycle, a necessary dissolution before new growth, the winter darkness preceding spring renewal. While the Eleusinian mysteries offered group transformation through annual ritual, Orphic traditions provided more individual paths to wisdom. Named after the legendary musician whose journey to reclaim Eurydice represented the soul's potential for transcendence, these teachings emphasized personal effort toward spiritual development. Central to Orphic theology was the dual nature of humanity. Mortals contained both titanic elements, inherited from primordial beings destroyed by Zeus, and Dionysian sparks, divine components from the god dismembered by those same titans. This cosmic tragedy explained both human potential for baseness and the capacity for divinity, creating a spiritual tension that propelled the soul's journey through multiple lives. Orphic cosmology expanded traditional Greek cosmogony with an emphasis on cyclical transformation. Souls descended from divine realms into mortal bodies, accumulated knowledge through multiple incarnations, underwent purification between lives in the underworld, and gradually refined themselves until they achieved ultimate reunion with the divine source. This process required active participation, not passive acceptance of fate. Initiatory practices in Orphic circles included dietary restrictions, particularly abstinence from meat and beans. These prohibitions reflected beliefs about the vegetative origin of the soul and the need to maintain purification for spiritual progress. Practitioners also wore distinctive white garments and avoided certain types of burials, believing that traditional rites might trap the soul in material cycles rather than facilitate spiritual ascent. Orphic hymns and poems served as tools for soul work. Their rhythms and metaphysics were designed to alter consciousness. These sacred texts included detailed maps of the journey to the afterlife, specific tokens and passwords for navigating underworld trials, and instructions for achieving liberation from the cycle of rebirth. Golden tablets, buried with some Orphic initiates, contained precise directives: what to say to guardians, which waters to avoid, how to claim divine providence when challenged. Unlike the communal experience of Eleusis, Orphic practices often involved solitary worship and personal asceticism, a disciplined training that prepared the soul for its eventual journey. Meditation on specific myths, memorization of sacred formulae, and cultivation of detachment from material existence, shaping practitioners into philosophers of death who lived with one foot already in eternity. Pythagoras and his followers synthesized Orphic insights with mathematical mysticism, creating a sophisticated framework for understanding the soul's journey through cosmic order. Where Orphism emphasized mystical experience, Pythagoreanism added a rational structure, viewing the universe as a musical harmony governed by mathematical principles that souls could learn to apprehend. The Pythagorean cosmos operated through numerical relationships that extended into the afterlife. Souls traversed spheres of existence, numbered according to sacred proportions. The realm of the afterlife itself possessed a geometric architecture, paths that followed ideal proportions, judgments rendered according to mathematical justice, purifications aligned with harmonic intervals. Understanding these principles allowed for more effective spiritual progress. The transmigration of souls became central to Pythagorean doctrine, with reincarnation following precise patterns based on karmic mathematics. The soul carried its ethical calculus from life to life, accumulating or shedding spiritual weight according to the moral gravity of actions. Underworld purification acted as a spiritual mathematics, calculating the appropriate remedies for each soul's imbalances. Their practices included communal living in pursuit of a harmonious existence. Members studied astronomy, mathematics, and music as tools for soul purification. They believed that understanding cosmic harmony prepared them for a greater harmony experienced after death. The famous theorem attributed to Pythagoras represented not only a mathematical truth, but a metaphysical principle. The relationships between triangular elements reflected deeper truths about the soul, the cosmos, and divinity. The desire to commune with the departed led to the emergence of specialized sites where the boundaries between worlds thinned enough for controlled contact. The Oracle of the Dead, a necromantion, combined religious authority with practical expertise in channeling spirits. These places operated due to specific geographical features, that supposedly facilitated communication with the shadowy realm. The Oracle of the Dead at Ephra, located on the Acheron, utilized the confluence point of three rivers: Acheron, sorrow; Phlegethon, blazing fire; and Cocytus, wailing. Pilgrims underwent multi-day preparation, including fasting, isolation, and ritual purification, before descending into a network of caves mimicking the geography of the underworld. The culmination of the experience occurred in a dark chamber where they hoped to encounter departed relatives or gain prophetic wisdom from ancient heroes. The architectural design enhanced the psychological effect. Narrow passages disoriented visitors. Varying floor levels created a sense of descent. Acoustics amplified whispers into otherworldly voices. Sacred pools reflected firelight in ways that suggested supernatural presence. The entire structure functioned as a theatrical mechanism for inducing liminal states where communication with the dead became psychologically plausible. Rituals followed precise protocols. Questioners offered libations specific to their intended interlocutor: wine for suicides, honey for murdered children, blood for warriors. They uttered precise invocations learned from the oracle's priests. Questions had to follow proper phrasing to avoid spiritual wrath. The priests themselves served as interpreters, trained to discern meaningful messages from incidental phenomena occurring at the threshold of worlds. These practices reflected a developed understanding of the underworld as permeable, if approached correctly, whereas earlier traditions viewed the realm of death as sealed except for heroic intrusion. The mystery traditions suggested that proper rituals could create temporary apertures for beneficial exchange between the living and the departed. This accessibility brought the wisdom of the underworld into practical application for mortal concerns. As these various mystery traditions matured, connections and syntheses emerged. Practitioners of different systems often engaged in multiple initiations, creating personal amalgams of esoteric wisdom. The flexibility of Greek religious practice allowed for the creative combining of Eleusinian emotion, Orphic theology, Pythagorean mathematics, and necromancy into individual spiritual paths. The accumulated wisdom traditions transformed popular understanding of death. No longer was the afterlife merely a destination determined by gods or fate. Through proper preparation, acquisition of knowledge, and ritual practice, souls could actively participate in their post-mortem journey. The underworld became a realm of possibility, not merely a place of judgment, a place where continued growth was possible. This democratization of divine knowledge represented a profound shift in Greek religious consciousness. What was once the prerogative of heroes, direct engagement with the mysteries of death, became accessible through initiation. The secrets of the underworld, passed down through generations of mystics and philosophers, offered mortals the opportunity to transcend their ordinary limits without requiring divine lineage or extraordinary courage. And yet the mysteries retained their enigmatic quality. Even while systematizing approaches to death's wisdom, they insisted that the deepest truths could not be fully expressed in words. Direct experience through ritual, meditation, and careful preparation remained essential. The underworld continued to offer its knowledge, not through mere transmission, but through the transformation of those who dared to seek its secrets. Thus the mystery traditions established that the realm of death contained not only judgment and a dwelling place, but also education and evolution. The Lord of Shadows presided over a domain that served a cosmic function through individual transformation, offering paths to wisdom in life. These traditions ensured that death, when it came, would find souls prepared for its challenges and opportunities. As the mysteries offered empirical wisdom, philosophers began to question, analyze, and reframe traditional narratives about the underworld. What began as mythological narrative gradually evolved into systematic theology and ethical frameworks. These thinkers dared to ask, what if the afterlife reflected not merely divine caprice, but cosmic justice operating according to rational principles? The earliest literary depictions of the realm of death appear in Homer's epics, where shades exist in a diminished form, devoid of the vital force that defined their mortal lives. Achilles' famous lament to Odysseus crystallized this bleakness. He would rather serve as a serf among the living than rule over all the dead. This vision emphasized separation. souls severed from light, sensation, and meaningful action. The Homeric underworld operated through attrition, not punishment or reward. All souls, regardless of their earthly status or deeds, wandered the same asphodel meadows. The only distinction lay in burial rites. Those denied proper ceremony remained restlessly between worlds. Rather than embracing the shadowy abode, death became the ultimate equalizer, reducing heroes and kings to insubstantial echoes. This philosophical concept posited that meaning resided solely in mortal existence. The afterlife served merely as a repository for what had been, not a platform for what might be. Heroes sought kleos, immortal glory earned through deeds that would outlast their physical forms. Yet even this glory existed mainly in the memory of the living, offering little solace to the faded spirits below. Homer's influence endured precisely because of his stark honesty. Instead of offering comforting illusions of posthumous rewards, his vision confronted the bitter reality of mortality, consciousness without agency, memory without substance, a self reduced to a whisper of names. This confrontation with meaninglessness spurred both religious innovation and philosophical inquiry. Plato revolutionized the theology of the underworld, imbuing it with ethical purpose and metaphysical weight. His myth of presented in the Republic, reimagined the afterlife as a cosmic tribunal where divine justice operated with mathematical precision. Souls did not merely arrive at predetermined destinations. They chose their next incarnations based on wisdom gained in previous lives. The philosopher's vision expanded traditional geography with mechanical sophistication. Souls traversed the spindle of necessity, where the fates sang harmonies that dictated cosmic motion. They witnessed judges who rendered verdicts not only on immediate moral worth but also on the soul's capacity for future improvement through experience. The process emphasized learning through consequences, rather than mere retribution. Plato's innovations included the concept of intermediate purification. Between death and rebirth, souls underwent purification proportionate to their moral weight. This purgative process operated through both pleasure and pain, ensuring each soul fully experienced the consequences of its choices. The underworld became an alchemical laboratory, where spiritual transformation preceded return to embodied existence. His concept posited that the architecture of the afterlife responded to ethical needs. Instead of fixed regions, space was organized according to the soul's requirements for growth. The most corrupt required the deepest purgation, while the nearly perfect needed only minor adjustment before ascending to divine contemplation. This flexibility rendered cosmic justice both personal and universal. The philosopher also redefined the purpose of funerary customs and mourning. Rather than ensuring proper placement in fixed post-mortem abodes, these practices were meant to prepare souls for continued journeys toward truth. Death marked a transition between phases of learning, not a final examination. This perspective transformed religious practice from fearful appeasement into wise preparation for ongoing existence. Stoic philosophers approached death through the lens of natural philosophy, viewing the soul's destiny as an expression of the logos, the divine reason permeating all existence. Their interpretations of the underworld emphasized rationality and acceptance, rather than mystery or reward. Death represented a return to the source, a dissolution of individual identity into the cosmic consciousness from which it had temporarily emerged. Marcus Aurelius characterized death as a mere change of elements. You came into this world as a part, and as a part you will depart. Accept the change as you would accept a seasonal change in nature. This perspective dissipated traditional fears about underworld journeys or post-mortem judgments. The realm of death existed as a natural phenomenon, requiring no separate geography or divine governance. The Stoic afterlife amounted to an inevitable return to fundamental principles. Just as bodies decomposed into earth, water, air, and fire, souls reintegrated with the universal mind. Individual consciousness might persist briefly during this transition, but ultimately merged with the eternal pattern from which it came. This process carried neither reward nor punishment, only the completion of natural cycles. Their ethical framework was motivated by duty, rather than fear or hope regarding death. Living in accordance with virtue aligned one with the cosmic order in the present moment. Whether individual consciousness survived death became inconsequential compared to fulfilling one's role in the universe of reason. The underworld, if it existed at all, operated according to the same logical principles that governed all existence. This philosophy offered liberation from superstition while retaining ethical gravitas. Death could not threaten those who understood their fundamental unity with all existence. The underworld lost its power to intimidate or entice, becoming merely another expression of nature's inexorable processes. The wise prepared for death not through ritual or belief, but through philosophical contemplation that revealed mortality's place within eternal reason. In contrast to philosophical abstraction, mystery religions asserted that direct experience of divine truth offered transformation beyond theoretical understanding. These traditions preserved and evolved mythological frameworks, insisting that profoundest wisdom came through initiation, not analysis. The Dionysian mysteries focused on the death of the ego as preparation for actual mortality. Through ecstatic ritual involving wine, music, and symbolic dismemberment, participants experienced a temporary dissolution of individual identity. This death practice taught that consciousness could survive the loss of habitual self-awareness, preparing souls for the ultimate transition with diminished fear and resistance. Bacchic writings specifically engaged with the underworld through their recreation of Orpheus's journey. Initiates symbolically descended, died, and were reborn through ritual sequences that blurred the line between mythological narrative and personal transformation. The experience reportedly left participants fundamentally altered. Fear of death was replaced by curiosity regarding continued existence beyond the bodily form. The mysteries of Isis adapted Egyptian wisdom to Greek needs, presenting death as a journey toward reunification with divine principles. The goddess Isis's quest for her dismembered consort Osiris paralleled every soul's search for wholeness. Initiates learned that apparent destruction served necessary purposes in the cosmic cycle of renewal. Death became a portal, not an end, a passage, not a destination. These traditions asserted that philosophical speculation could not substitute for empirical knowledge. While thinkers debated the topography of the underworld and theological principles, mystics claimed direct encounter with death's mysteries through sacred drama and altered states of consciousness. They offered not arguments but transformation, not theories but wisdom earned through diligent preparation and courageous engagement with liminal states. The interplay between philosophical analysis and religious experience created dynamic tension within Greek culture. Temples hosting mystery rituals stood alongside gymnasia where rational discourse analyzed traditional beliefs. Initiates might also study philosophy, while thinkers often sought mystical validation for their theories through religious practice. This synthesis produced figures like Plutarch, who served as a priest at Delphi while simultaneously writing philosophical treatises on the divine nature. His works sought to reconcile mythological tradition with philosophical insight, suggesting that ancient stories contained rational truths apprehendable by both reason and revelation. The underworld in this system operated according to a moral law, apprehendable through diligent study, but fully knowable only through sacred experience. Conflicts arose primarily around claims of certainty. Philosophers insisted that reason alone could ascertain the truth about death's nature and its consequences. Religious authorities maintained that divine mysteries transcended human logic, demanding submission to revelation. Popular religion often embraced contradictory elements, practicing both philosophical ethics and mystery initiations, without feeling compelled to resolve theoretical tensions. This multiplicity of approaches enriched Greek culture in its engagement with mortality. The realm of death sustained multiple interpretations, rational, mystical, traditional, innovative, allowing individuals to find suitable paths for their temperament and circumstances. The underworld became a laboratory where humanity wrestled with its ultimate questions, finding not singular answers but diverse wisdom born from continuous exploration. Philosophical evolution, therefore, transformed Hades from a mythological backdrop into a focal point for humanity's deepest reflections. Whether Homeric tears, Platonic mathematics, Stoic acceptance, or mystical transformation, each approach reflected humanity's engagement with its own finitude. The realm of death, originally crafted to house mortal endings, evolved into a mirror reflecting each culture's highest hopes and deepest fears about existence itself. As Roman civilization expanded, it absorbed and systematized Greek religious concepts, adapting them to distinctly Roman values and sensibilities. The underworld, now referred to by various names including Orkos, and eventually associated with wealth through the title of Pluto, underwent significant reinterpretation. Roman pragmatism reformatted mystical Greek concepts into more structured, law-oriented visions of the afterlife. The Romans approached divine identification with characteristic practicality. Rather than simply adopting Greek names wholesale, they identified a functional equivalent within their own religious tradition, before embracing a more complete mythological structure. This process created layers of meaning that enriched, rather than supplanted, the original concepts. Pater, the Roman father of riches, originally governed subterranean wealth, both mineral and agricultural. His early association with soil fertility naturally linked him to mortality through the cycle of death and renewal in planting. As Greek influence deepened, Pater absorbed the mythological complexity of a dark lord. Retaining his connection to terrestrial abundance, the title Pluto emerged as a particularly Roman innovation, emphasizing prosperity stemming from the chthonic realm. This dual identity as ruler of death and source of wealth perfectly aligned with Roman values, which associated material success with divine favor. Temples of Pluto sometimes functioned as banks, where treasures could be safely stored under divine protection, creating a literal link between the underworld deity and monetary fortune. Cerberus retained his core form and function but acquired Latin epithets that highlighted different aspects. The Romans referred to him as triceps, three-headed, and associated him with iron collars used for wild dogs. They developed specific protocols for his appeasement, including special honey cakes called sopos, which became a standardized ritual practice in a way Greek traditions had not formalized. The ferryman continued his eternal duty under the same name, though the Romans depicted him with distinctly Latin features. Their art emphasized his ancient appearance more dramatically than Greek portrayals, creating eerie visages that underscored death's estrangement from beauty and youth. The requirements for the obol coin were codified into specific denominations corresponding to Roman currency. Virgil's Aeneid crystallized the Roman understanding of the underworld in a way that influenced Western imagination for millennia. Virgil's systematic description of the realm of death combined Greek geographical features with Roman organizational principles, creating the most detailed and influential map of the afterlife in classical literature. Its entrance near Lake Avernus in Campania became canonical for Roman pilgrims. The volcanic landscape, with its sulfuric emissions and mysterious atmosphere, provided compelling physical evidence of supernatural access points. The location aligned with Etruscan sacred geography, offering Romans a domestic portal to divine mysteries previously associated with distant Greek sites. Virgil's structural innovations included a vestibule of the underworld, where various personified sufferings awaited to greet arrivals. Here grief, care, disease, old age, fear, hunger, and death itself gathered, abstract concepts made concrete as preliminary warnings of mortality's companions. This Roman addition emphasized the psychological reality of approaching death before souls reached the traditional mythological features. The Cumean Sibyl, serving as Aeneas's guide through these regions, represented the Roman integration of prophetic tradition with underworld navigation. Her role combined Greek oracular wisdom with Etruscan knowledge of death, creating a figure who understood both the geography and the purpose of mortality's dominions. Through her, the journey acquired a didactic purpose. Each location offered a lesson on proper living and dying. Virgil's depiction of judgment became more nuanced than traditional accounts. While Minos still determined the fate of souls, his court now operated with Roman legal precision. Evidence was presented, testimony heard, and circumstances considered, all mirroring the judicial processes Romans valued in their earthly courts. The underworld demonstrated that divine justice, like Roman law, operated through careful deliberation, not arbitrary decree. Roman funerary customs evolved from simple agrarian rituals into elaborate ceremonies that reinforced social hierarchy while honoring the dead. These practices blended ancestor veneration with underworld mythology, creating complex relationships between living families and deceased members. The journey to proper burial began immediately after death. Romans closed the eyes and mouth to seal the soul within until the final rites were performed. They called the deceased's name 3 times, a practice that checked for premature death while initiating the separation between realms. Coins placed in the mouth served a dual purpose, as payment to Charon and as insurance against awakening to find oneself accidentally buried alive. Funeral processions reflected Roman values of public display and familial dignity. The wealthy hired professional mourners, musicians, and even actors wearing death masks of ancestors who had held public office. These imagines appeared in the funeral cortege, creating a visible link between the current death and a lineage of family achievements. Such processions demonstrated that individual mortality served collective continuity. Tomb architecture evolved from simple grave markers to elaborate mausoleums that rivaled religious temples in scale. These structures served as permanent bridges between worlds, places where living descendants could maintain relationships with deceased family members. Inscriptions often addressed passers-by directly, ensuring strangers would remember the dead and perhaps offer libations that sustained the soul's afterlife existence. The Festival of Parentalia illustrated Roman innovations in ancestor worship. For 9 days each February, families visited tombs to offer bread, wine, salt, and flowers, sharing ritual meals with their dead. This institutionalized period of mourning transformed Greek underworld concepts into a civil religion that bound families together through shared memory and collective duty to the departed. Roman culture systematically recontextualized Greek deities to align them with their own value systems. Persephone became Proserpina, which emphasized her role as a divine maiden, but sometimes diminished her regal authority. This shift reflected Roman discomfort with powerful female figures wielding sovereignty over fundamental cosmic processes. The Roman understanding of Proserpina's journey focused less on cosmic necessity and more on breached and restored familial duty, making the myth more personally relatable while embedding it within Roman family values. Agrarian aspects gained prominence over mystical transformation, aligning the story with practical Roman concerns for crop success. Mercury expanded Hermes's role as psychopomp with characteristically Roman organizational skills. The Romans depicted him with accounting tablets, suggesting the realm of death operated with bureaucratic precision. Souls were not merely guided to a destination but properly registered and assigned according to administrative protocols that would have impressed Roman officials. The Furies underwent significant reinterpretation in Roman hands. While the Greeks often depicted them as primal forces of vengeance, the Romans emphasized their role in maintaining social order. They became the Durae, witnesses who reported crimes to divine authorities, acting more as celestial prosecutors than autonomous avengers. This shift reflected the Roman preference for legal process over arbitrary punishment. Hecate retained her position at crossroads but acquired distinctly Roman attributes. The Romans created elaborate shrines, called Hecatea, where 3 roads met, with specific offerings and timing requirements. Her role expanded to include household protection, making her less solely focused on underworld transitions and more integrated into daily Roman religious life. The Roman imperial cult found natural connections with underworld mythology. Emperors, particularly after deification, needed pathways between earthly power and divine status. The underworld offered a convenient metaphorical framework for discussing imperial transitions while preserving religious sensibilities. Divine emperors' connections to wealth, Pluto Dispater, underscored their right to command earthly resources. Their potential journeys into the underworld after death took on significance as examples of human potential to transcend mortality through extraordinary achievements. Imperial funerals thus became state ceremonies, demonstrating the proper cosmic transition from mortal ruler to divine patron. The practice of imperial apotheosis required complex integration of Greek underworld concepts with Roman political theology. The souls of outstanding rulers did not merely enter Elysium. They ascended directly to divine status, bypassing ordinary post-mortem processing. This elevation created a precedent that influential Romans could hope to follow, linking proper conduct in life with extraordinary afterlife rewards. Roman poets employed underworld imagery to praise or critique contemporary politics. Dead heroes became exemplars of civic virtue, while wayward sons joined the eternal punishments of Tartarus. The flexible nature of mythological interpretation allowed writers to address current events through traditional narrative frameworks, making underworld stories relevant to imperial concerns. Thus, Roman adaptation transformed Greek underworld concepts into a systematic religious structure that served state ideology while retaining personal significance. The realm of death became thoroughly Romanized, more organized, more linked to material wealth, more integrated with family and civic duty. Yet beneath these practical adaptations, fundamental mysteries persisted, offering Romans both solace and contemplation as they confronted mortality in their expanding empire. The realm of shades, beginning as a primordial abyss, transformed into one of humanity's most enduring symbolic systems. From chaos through cosmic order to philosophical frameworks, the journey of the Greek underworld, completed by the Romans, would echo through centuries of subsequent culture. Its transformation from an ancient belief into an enduring metaphor demonstrates myth's capacity to adapt while retaining its essential power. As Christianity spread throughout the Mediterranean world, it encountered well-established underworld concepts that proved both a challenge and a resource. Church fathers neither ignored nor wholly condemned these traditions, but selectively incorporated elements that aligned with biblical revelation, reinterpreting others within new theological frameworks. The geography of Tartarus found particular resonance with emerging concepts of hell, eternal torment, so precisely apportioned to specific sins, provided templates for Christian imaginings of divine punishment. Tantalus's reach for fruit became a metaphor for souls grasping at salvation without true repentance. Sisyphus's endless toil illustrated the futility of works without faith. The very precision of Greek afterlife justice facilitated the transition into Christian moral theology. The development of purgatory drew heavily from the Greek concept of purification between lives. The notion that souls could be purified through graduated suffering rather than immediately dispatched to ultimate destinations aligned with the wisdom of intermediate states found in earlier mysteries. This adaptation allowed for mercy within justice, satisfying both philosophical rigor and pastoral concern for human frailty. The Christian landscape of the dead also retained blessed spaces from the classical tradition. The blessed fields of Elysium echoed in concepts of paradise, while the journey to final judgment retained structural similarities to Greek precedents. Even the problematic figure of Christ's harrowing of hell, his descent to free righteous souls imprisoned from ancient times, paralleled heroic underworld journeys that sought to rescue the unjustly held. St. Augustine particularly engaged with classical afterlife concepts, making significant efforts to demonstrate how pagan wisdom pointed toward Christian revelation, though not attaining it. Rather than dismissing Platonic theories of soul purification as mere error, he sought to show how ancient philosophers had grasped partial truths that found their completion in gospel teachings. The medieval imagination thoroughly synthesized classical and Christian elements, creating visions of the afterlife of unprecedented complexity. Dante's Divine Comedy represents the culmination of this process, with Virgil himself serving as guide through realms that combine Greek geography with Christian theology, Roman organization with medieval metaphysics. The medieval underworld retained classical features, rivers with specific purposes, guardians at thresholds, graduated punishments mirroring earthly misdeeds. However, these elements took on new meaning within a cosmic drama, wholly centered on the story of salvation. Ancient rulers of the dead yielded authority to Christian judgment, while classical heroes became exemplars of virtuous pagans who achieved what earthly wisdom could apprehend without divine grace. Arthurian legends incorporated underworld motifs into quests for sacred objects. The journey to Annwn, the Celtic otherworld that merged with Greek Hades, became a template for spiritual trials where knights confronted the state of their own souls. These adaptations retained the essential pattern: descent, trial, transformation, and return, while redirecting the purpose toward Christian chivalric ideals. Visual art notably showcased this synthesis. Medieval illuminated manuscripts depicted the geography of hell with an attention to architectural detail that surpassed classical precision. Bosch and his contemporaries painted underworld scenes that blended mythological creatures with uniquely Christian torments, creating images that both enlightened and terrified viewers about the stakes of mortality. The tradition of mystery plays brought underworld dramas directly into medieval communities. These productions made tangible what theological treatises explained abstractly: the soul's journey from judgment through purification or punishment to its final destination. Audiences watched familiar biblical figures interact with classical personages in realms constructed from both traditions. The Renaissance brought a renewed interest in classical sources alongside Christian faith, creating space for underworld imagery to regain prominence in its original mythological context. Humanist scholars rediscovered Greek texts that the medieval tradition had imperfectly preserved, allowing for a more nuanced appreciation of ancient religious psychology. Artists like Michelangelo incorporated Greek underworld figures into Christian contexts with sophisticated theological rationale. His Last Judgment includes Charon ferrying souls across the Acheron, demonstrating how classical symbols could illuminate rather than contradict biblical revelation if properly understood. This synthesis demonstrated a mature cultural confidence, rather than an anxious syncretism. Literary works moved beyond religious instruction to explore psychological dimensions. Shakespeare's ghosts, inhabiting liminal spaces between vengeance and repose, drew from both classical and medieval traditions. Marlowe's Faustus negotiated with classical demons in a Christian hell, creating dramatic tension through competing systems of divine justice. The exploration of consciousness itself during this period heavily relied on underworld metaphors. The dark night of the soul, the descent into madness, the pathway to self-discovery, all utilized imagery honed over millennia of mythological development. Renaissance psychology thus continued ancient traditions, directing them toward inner rather than exclusively outer realms. Occult traditions experienced a resurgence that further preserved and developed Greek underworld concepts. Alchemical texts described spiritual transformation using the language of death's dominions, dissolution, putrefaction, and rebirth. John Dee and other scholar magicians attempted to recreate ancient practices of necromancy, while asserting Christian rationale for such contacts. The Romantic movement once again transformed underworld symbolism, finding in the realm of death ideal metaphors for the newly explored territories of the unconscious mind. Poets and artists found in Orpheus's failed journey the essential drama of artistic creation, the attempt to bring inspiration from darkness into light, always risking the loss of what was sought through premature revelation. Goethe's Faust adapted classical underworld elements into a psychological framework that anticipated depth psychology. The descent into temptation, the encounter with one's shadow, the negotiation with darker aspects of the self, all borrowed a mythological structure while exploring emerging concepts of personality's complexity. Gothic literature extensively employed underworld imagery to create atmospheric effect. Ruined temples of Hecate, catacombs echoing with laments, mysterious pools reflecting the faces of the dead. These elements created emotional landscapes where rational boundaries dissolved. The underworld became a shorthand for regions where ordinary consciousness could not safely penetrate. Blake's visionary works explicitly reinterpreted classical mythology within a personal cosmology. His underworld figures operated as psychological forces within each soul, rather than external deities governing separate realms. This internalization represented a culmination of a process begun in antiquity, the recognition that the dominions of death held mirrors for mortal consciousness itself. Jung and other Romantic theorists posited that mythology represented humanity's earliest attempts to map inner experience. The underworld particularly fascinated them as a symbol of the darkness preceding consciousness, the raw material from which civilization and individual awareness emerged. Their interpretations consciously departed from literal belief, asserting a deeper truth for mythological insight. Modern culture continues to draw upon underworld traditions for metaphors, narrative structures, and psychological insights. Jungian psychology, in particular, embraced classical afterlife imagery as representations of archetypal patterns within the collective unconscious. The hero's journey through the realm of death became a template for discussing individuation, the soul's development toward wholeness through confrontation with its own depths. Popular media, from video games to television series, regularly employs structures inherited from Greek afterlife concepts. The RPG genre particularly delights players by allowing them to enact heroic descents, confront underworld guardians, and emerge transformed. These virtual journeys satisfy psychological needs that ancient mystery traditions once addressed through ritual initiations. Literature continues to explore underworld themes with sophisticated awareness of their symbolic potential. Milan Kundera's use of memory as lethe, Toni Morrison's beloved ghosts, Haruki Murakami's Journeys Beneath Tokyo, all demonstrate how ancient patterns retain power when applied to modern concerns of identity, trauma, and transformation. Visual art engages classical underworld imagery with deliberate understanding of its accumulated meanings. Contemporary installations might combine Cerberus with surveillance technology, suggesting that ancient principles of guardianship operate in modern contexts. These works presuppose audience familiarity with mythological allusions while simultaneously questioning their relevance. Music across genres frequently references classical underworld journeys. Progressive rock bands craft concept albums around Orpheus's descent. Hip-hop artists employ Tartarus imagery to discuss systemic injustice. These adaptations suggest that the realm of death continues to offer narrative and metaphorical resources for artistic expression. Thus, the transformation of the Greek underworld from a mythological place into a cultural symbol demonstrates how human imagination processes fundamental questions about mortality. What began as an explanation of what happens after death evolved into a resource for understanding consciousness, ethics, creativity, and transcendence while living. Its persistence through cultural transitions, from pagan to Christian, from religious to psychological, from supernatural to metaphorical, testifies to its applicability on multiple levels of meaning. The realm constructed by ancient imagination addressed questions so fundamental to human experience that subsequent cultures found it valuable to adapt rather than abandon it. Modern secular society retains a surprising connection to these ancient patterns. When psychologists discuss exploring their darker impulses, when artists describe a descent to the wellsprings of creativity, when seekers undertake journeys of spiritual transformation, they unconsciously retrace the structured pathway that led heroes through Hades' domains. The underworld journey remains a viable template because it addresses psychic realities that transcend historical periods. This legacy suggests that the Greek underworld represents not so much an outdated belief system as an enduring navigational chart for human consciousness. Its meticulous mapping of inner territories, guilt, memory, desire, transformation, continues to offer guidance for those willing to enter darkness as a prerequisite for wisdom. The realm beneath the earth has become the depths within, retaining its power to illuminate even in ages claiming to have surpassed its original context. Thus, the underworld stands not merely as a historical curiosity, but as an ongoing presence in humanity's endeavor to comprehend the inscrutable. From its origins in primordial darkness, through its crystallization into systematic mythology, to its abstraction into a universal symbol, it traces the evolution of human consciousness itself, our eternal quest to bring light into shadows, meaning into mystery, and understanding into the ultimate transition that all are destined to undertake. I, the Lord of Shades who first embraced my dark dominion, could not have foreseen how my domain would illuminate the human condition through millennia, and yet, perhaps this metamorphosis represents the highest wisdom of a dying realm. that something created to contain endings would become a source of endless beginnings, that a space designed for finitude would yield infinite possibility, and that the deepest darkness would reveal humanity's most enduring light. Thus, the Greek underworld completes its journey from mythological geography to psychological truth. From ancient belief to enduring metaphor, its story, like the souls it was crafted to receive, finds not an end, but a transformation. The realm beneath the earth becomes the wisdom within. The realm of shades illuminates the light of understanding, and the dominion of death teaches us to live. So ends the long saga of the Greek underworld. Yet like all true tales of mortality's mystery, it holds no true ending, only an invitation to continue descending into wisdom, ascending through transformation, and discovering that the journey through death always leads back to life.